Learn this Mac. It's a little different than the iPad.
I now call this meeting of the Jacksonville City Council to order. I want to welcome everyone who's come out for the meeting this evening and also those that will be watching the meeting on G10 television. We'll begin tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Logan Sosa, followed by the invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Heavenly Father, as always, we pause to give you thanks. Thanks for this beautiful day. And as we look forward to Thanksgiving Day, we individually and we as the city of Jacksonville have so much to be thankful for. And we give you thanks. You're such a gracious and loving God, and you have blessed us so greatly. And one of those blessings is our veterans who we've recognized this month, who served in the military and continue to serve in this community. And we especially give thanks for them. And we pray this evening for those who are active duty and who are here and around the world serving us and our community, our nation, and for their anxious families. Protect them and be with them. And as always, we pray for our mayor and for our council, that your guidance and your direction will be with them as they deliberate their citizens' business. All this we ask in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Sorry.
Council, you have got a copy of the agenda for tonight's meeting, and there's going to be a couple of changes on there. We'll move the reports into one city to follow. We'll follow number 7 on the agenda prior to 8 and 9, and also the one city moment. So with that, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
Motion to adopt the agenda with the so-called approvals.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Next, we have our first section of public comment, and no one signed a sheet, so we'll move on to the adoption of the minutes from the November 6, 2024 workshop meeting and the 4 consent items.
Move for the adoption of the minutes and the consent items.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. We go down to number 5 under old business. And this is coming back to the UDO text amendment on signage. And Ryan,
Mr. Mayor, just to refresh council and the public's knowledge, this was one that you had on the last agenda and that you recessed the public hearing to give us additional time to do some research and to come back with, address some of the concerns council members have. And I think first Ryan is ready to address those, and then if you would open it up for any from the public before y'all deliberate. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. As Mr. Carter just stated, this is a carryover where we brought a few changes focused on businesses along Marine Boulevard and Lejeune Boulevard that wanted to have some outdoor storage area. In conjunction with those changes, staff had included a couple of clarifying information items as far as signage goes. And council asked that staff do some research, which we did for the mayor council, and we've got our findings here on the screen before you. As you can see, it was focused on 2 main areas: what other people were regulating as far as political signs in the municipal rights-of-ways, and then what other municipalities are doing as far as holiday decorations. So you'll see here that we pulled several different locations, looked at ordinances, and on the political signs in the municipal right-of-ways, as you can see, some allowed, some are prohibited, so there's really not a clear-cut answer. As we told council last meeting, that the state law preempts the city's rules, so they're allowed to go into the municipal rights-of-ways. I'm sorry, the state rights-of-ways within the municipality, but the city rights-of-ways are treated differently. We are able to regulate them whether we want to allow them or whether we want to prohibit them. And then as far as the holiday decorations, some people have it in the code, some people have it in the zoning ordinances. Sometimes it's not expressly clear. Fayetteville is an ordinance that we go to regularly because it was drafted by the same consulting firm that prepared Jacksonville's UDO, so it's real easy for us to find. And as you'll see there, they have identified 45 days prior to the holidays and then 10 days after. So the city of Jacksonville already has 10 days after. We just don't have the start period. With that being said, we've included 3 ordinances for council to consider. Staff is in support of Ordinance C, because that's basically what planning board and staff had recommended previously, with the few adjustments that we believe captures council's concerns. That is to deal with holiday lights as it relates to non-residential zones only. We've moved the 30 days to 45, and then we've mirrored the ordinance provisions that the statute has to allow campaign signs within, or political signs within, the city rights-of-way. So to sum it up, all of the items that we identified last time, with clarification that it's 45 days, not 30, is for non-residential zones only for holiday lights, and then the changes for outside display that we talked about previously, and that it wouldn't matter, a candidate or their campaign group would not have to determine is it a city road or a state road. They would all be treated the same. So during the 30 days prior to the early voting period, they would be allowed to put the campaign signs within rights-of-ways. So it would mirror the states. And so as stated, it's basically A with a few tweaks based on council's information. So staff is in support of revision, which is found in Ordinance C. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the mayor and council may have.
I have a question, Mr. King. Can you go back to the previous slide? With Fayetteville talking about the holiday decorations, is there any allowance between Thanksgiving and Christmas with that rollout date? For example, if some people start putting up their Christmas decorations prior to Thanksgiving and they keep it up until after the New Year's, would that be affected by this 45 days, or does Fayetteville take that into consideration?
So 45 days prior to December the 25th would be November the 10th.
And next question, are we talking about calendar days?
That would be calendar days, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Other questions? Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor. Council.
Go ahead and reconvene the public hearing in this matter. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this matter present? Please indicate by raising your hand. Yes, if you would step to the... I'm sorry. Oh, okay, you're fine. All right. Seeing no one, I'll recess or close the public hearing, and you're being asked to approve the UDO text amendment, as Mr. King has indicated.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve option C as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Okay. Next item on the agenda is number 6, and this is a public hearing on a Unified Development Ordinance text amendment to Article 3 zoning district, subsection 3.8 Planned Development District, PUDs. Ryan King will be presenting this item.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This is a staff-initiated Unified Development Ordinance text amendment. City staff has recognized over the last decade since the Unified Development Ordinance was adopted, we've only seen 2 plan unit developments. One was for an existing development, one hasn't come to fruition yet. We believe that that's a tool that's in our toolbox. It hasn't been utilized the way that we would like to see it. And we've looked around, and like I stated in the previous item, we've looked at Fayetteville. They've had a few more years dealing with their Unified Development Ordinance to adjust things and see how things are working. And one of the things that we noticed was they had eliminated, they have a 0 acreage requirement for the requirements for an area to be rezoned. So staff is proposing that we look at changing the plan unit development residential and the plan unit development commercial in an effort to try to spark development interests. And because, the city has kind of built out, there's some vacant property, but there's a lot of places to where they may not have 15 or 35 acres to create a planned unit development area. And as such, we would like to eliminate that acreage requirement for 2 of the 3 and also make a few adjustments to the table. Before you on the screen, this is the PDR zone. You can see there's quite a bit of strike-throughs where we've eliminated the 10 or 15 acres or the 35 acres. This matches Fayetteville's ordinance pretty much verbatim, and we think that this change will open up some opportunities that we haven't seen. So even though it's been in the ordinance, you've had to have these minimum acreage to even have it be considered. So Planning Board at their meeting in last week recommended approval, as is staff, because we think this will create a new development opportunity that we really haven't been able to utilize extensively. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that the mayor and council may have.
I have a question. So if council is going to take action on this proposed changes, it will be in effect tonight? Correct. How will this affect item number 7?
It will not.
Okay.
Because the other met the minimum acreage. So, instead of being whatever the 30 acres is, it would be 0 acres. But the other is already zoned planning and development already.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. This time I'll recess the regular meeting and open up public hearing on this matter. Is there anyone wish to speak to this particular item? Okay. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Council, you're being asked to approve the text amendment.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. All right. Go to number 7. And bear with me just a second. This is a public hearing on a map amendment, master plan and terms and conditions modifications for Georgetown Landing Plan Development Residential or PDR zone as 398 Allison Hatchell Avenue. And Jeremy Smith will be presenting this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Before you on agenda, item 7 is a request to modify an existing zoned property of planned development residential. This follows the same process as a map amendment, but it is not a rezoning. It is a modification to the master plan and terms and conditions of the existing PDR zoning at 398 Allison Hatchell Avenue. Some history to this project and the location before you on the screen in the Georgetown area. March 5th, 2013, City Council approved Thomas T. Hunter's request to rezone 35.9 acres from residential multifamily 5, and that was the zoning at the time, to planned development residential. That per that approval, the request then was to have a master plan that identified multifamily, a restaurant, medical facility, and a marina. Before you on the screen is the existing zoning of PDR for the 35.9 acre tract that's combined. That is 2 parcels separated by Blue Call Bay Drive. Surrounding property is zoned residential multifamily low density. And to the south is Camp Geiger and Camp Johnson. Before you on the screen and found in your attachment G are the terms and conditions that are being proposed by M&HM Development out of Fayetteville. They are the new owners of the property. On the next slide, I'll be giving a comparison or the master plan of, I'll have a more horizontal view of this in a moment, but I wanted to orient the master plan here comparable to how it's situated on the GIS. This is a comparison of what they're proposing to do versus what was previously approved and what the RM5 zoning in 2013, what it would equate to today. In the RMFLD, which is what RM5 was or is now, density allowed in that district is 8.7 units per acre. The previously approved PDR that the City Council approved in March 2013 had a density of 14 units per acre. M&HM is proposing 6.13 units per acre. Use types allowed in the RMFLD are generally single-family, duplexes, modular, residential uses. The PDR originally approved, the current approval PDR has apartments, marina, restaurant, medical facility, clubhouse, and a pool. The new proposed modification to that has single-family, townhome, a community docking facility, and a marina. Gated communities are allowed in the RMFLD zoning district. The original or the currently approved PDR master plan proposed a gated community. Per the master plan of the current proposal, they are not proposing to gate that community, and if approved, would not be gated. Setbacks allowed in the RMFLD zoning district are 20-foot front, 6-foot side, 15 rear. Under the current previously approved PDR, they propose 10-foot front, 5-foot side, 10-foot rear. Under the new proposal, they have a 20-foot front, 15 rear, 5 side, which aligns more with the current RMFLD zoning district. Current buffering required in the RMFLD are none. The original or the previously approved PDR proposed a 30-foot buffer adjacent to 3 lots in the area and a brick wall. The current proposed PDR modification has a 20-foot type A buffer with no fencing along its outer perimeter, and you'll see that in the master plan on the in a couple slides. Wrapping up the comparison, RMFLD street design is per the MSSD. Current approved is per their master plan, and the same goes for the current proposed master plan. They are proposing one public street through the middle and also paving the existing right-of-way of Blue Call Bay Drive. Archaeological survey, this is unique to this. This was a request as a result of some of the neighborhood meetings that M&HM held in the neighborhood to have an archaeological survey to look for buildings and sites, grave sites or whatnot in the area, and they have agreed to make it part of their terms and conditions to conduct an archaeological survey. It is not required in the RMFLD and was not part of the currently approved PDR. TIA, traffic impact analysis, RMFLD is required per UDO when necessary. The previously currently approved PDR required it, and it is required under the new proposed modified terms and conditions. This is the previously approved master plan. It identifies a marina, a restaurant, urgent care facility adjacent to Blue Call Bay Avenue. It says Avenue, it is Drive, and then 440 plus apartment in the other areas. This is the currently proposed master plan that identifies 120 maximum townhome units in the pink, and the purple area and the blue are single family, totaling 100 units max. The community dock facility, marina area to the north, and you'll see the slips proposed. That is just shown on here. They may not get that many approved by CAMA when they submit to CAMA. And you'll notice the green outline on this map before you, that is the proposed 20-foot buffering with fence around that facility. And with all that said, I would be happy to entertain any questions that the board has. The Planning Advisory Board recommended that the City Council, along with staff, approve the request, the modified terms and conditions and master plan with the evaluation found within the staff report based on findings of fact A through J being found in the affirmative, and that the modification allowing for residential development with more suitable density and type that is consistent with the surrounding area. Again, I myself, members of the Technical Review Committee, and representatives of M&HM Development are in attendance and would be happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
One quick point of clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
On the previous screen, you said that's just a vegetative buffer now, not a fence, correct?
It will be a fence and vegetative
It's
buffer.
both.
Yes.
Thank you.
They are proposing as our type A buffer, which is typically a 30-foot, but they are reducing it down, so you'll still have the same plantings that are required in the type A. So you'll have trees, shrubs, and fence, 6-foot fence.
What kind of fence?
6-foot opaque, it could be wood.
I could be wrong, but I thought they just proposed shrubs before.
The original approval, the original request?
No, the change,
The
actually. I thought.
change. Back up a couple slides.
Buffering is a 20-foot type A buffer with no fencing. You're correct, I'm sorry. And they may add some clarification here, but I believe it may be we'll ask for clarification with MNHM if they propose to do a fence, and we'll get that clarification. And it may be where we did talk with them, they may be willing to do a fence where those adjacent property owners that abut directly to this project may want a fence, and they'll be willing to do that. But I'll let Mr. Bryant Spencer talk to that.
Thank you.
I had a question right quick, Mr. Smith. With the use type, go back to
Okay.
the original slide. For the use types, the apartment, the marina, is the marina now the docking facility?
They're not proposing to do like a marina as in the general sense. A marina has boat slips, fueling, retail sales, anything that kind of equates to your typical boating facility, whereas a docking facility is primarily just boat slips.
Okay. And no more clubhouse/pool?
No.
Okay. Now, under this plan, didn't the old plan also include, seemed like that Dr. Hunter won an agricultural farm?
That was not anywhere in our documentation from the 2013 master plan
You sure?
that I am aware of. And I do not see it identified on that master plan there before me.
Because I remember he spoke about it, having an agricultural farm.
Okay. And that may be allowed within that area, a community farm or a community garden, vegetation.
I have another question. Can you go back to that, the uses comparing, the one after, the street? What street are we proposing?
So in their master plan, if you look at the connection between Conover Street and the.
Can you draw this for me?
Let's see if hopefully the drawing is working tonight. They're going to turn it on for me. I'll give it a second here. Still not working, media. I'll give it a couple more minutes. I'll walk over.
Mr. Smith, is it the sections marked Road A and Road D?
Yes, Road A.
C.
Road A would be a public street connecting the end of Blue Call Bay Avenue and Conover Street. The other drives and the other drives, you'll have driveways in the townhome section and then proposed private streets in the single family.
So everything in there is private. Any other questions of Jeremy? Did you say someone was here?
There is a representative who I'm sure would be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Questions of the representative?
I guess to clarify the fencing part, because we did have a
Okay.
question on that.
Brian, do you want to speak to that?
Good evening. I'm Brian Spencer with MHM Development. I believe the question on the buffers, the 20-foot reduction to the type A buffer was it came out of the discussion, one of the discussions we had at one of the community meetings. The original plan, I believe, showed a fence surrounding the property. What we're proposing is a vegetative buffer in the areas where there are none, there will be planted, and where there is vegetation, it'll be supplemented if necessary. And the discussion with some of the residents and the individual owners along the roads where there are existing properties, the discussion was if they are in favor of fencing along their properties, that we would certainly do that. We're prepared to do that wherever the residents agree. We didn't know if it would be better to just say a fence everywhere, and then people don't want a fence behind their property. So we were kind of planning to address that with each individual owner as we go along. But that's why we're proposing the vegetative to supplement if there's fencing to go with it.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I got a question. Mr. Spencer, I know in one of the meetings you had discussed the possibility of actually like doing some improvements to the ditches, and because one of the big concerns there is safety and flooding. I mean, with the impact, currently there's a problem with that. And there's a concern about getting in and out of that area if something happens, because there's only one way in and one way out. And then that's a dangerous curve. That's the one way out right now. So can you discuss some of the improvements you said that you would work on possibly?
Yes, sir. Well, not with any specifics. And the reason I say that is because the traffic impact analysis is a requirement of the PUD, and we'll certainly do that post-approval. And the stormwater improvements that we have to put in for the property, as we said at the community meetings, if there are things that we can do as part of that to improve the area, we certainly would look at that and work with that city staff to do that. But I can't speak to specifically what those would be, other than, yes, the existing ditches, if there's places that can be cleaned out or improvements made to culverts, things like that, we can certainly address those as we go through our process.
Jeremy, with
Yes, sir.
With the traffic impact analysis, will they actually address the issue of safety with that?
So I believe Mr. Anthony Prinz, our Transportation Services Director, is in attendance and may be able to answer everything that a TIA may identify. But my limited knowledge on that is that the city cannot, by state law, require off-site improvements. So, if it's something down the street, state law dictates that a TIA, the city could not require that because of a project. But I'm sure it could be evaluated. But I don't think the TIA would address down the road. It would address the impacts of the proposed project on the adjacent street system.
You say Anthony's in?
I believe he was. He may be able to answer further clarification on everything that's involved with the traffic impact analysis.
Can I speak from this one? Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to Mr. Jackson to answer your question. The UDO does require that a traffic impact analysis submitted that meets our standards look at safety. Now, as Jeremy mentioned, there are certain limitations that we can actually require someone to do things off-site. And if they choose to do some of that stuff voluntarily, that's up to them. But safety was something that was taken into consideration during the last traffic study. And in fact, the developer at that time came up with some recommendations. Well, not recommendations, that's not the right way to say it. They made some commitments on alternative intersection connectivity and roadway alignment to help deal with the curve that you're talking about. I assume that's the most significant concern.
That's part of it. And then you got the water on the other side. Like I said, concern about what, just in case you have flooding that happens where the water rises and comes from that direction, and you have 2 or 3 trees that go down, and somebody can't get directly out there to move those trees. It's a big concern of the flooding issue, because I had just been elected when Florence happened,
right?
And I might have looked crazy doing it, but at that point, it was a Category 5. I don't remember exactly what happened when the Category 1 hit and the waters rose and how it affected Georgetown at that time. But it is a major concern. It was a concern before you had the possibility of all these units being built, possibly adding 600 people, family of 3, so or more. So that's just a big concern, and I'm sure that the Georgetown community would like to get a better understanding of how, if something like that happened, how would that be addressed at that particular time?
Sure. Well, I'm certain that our friend Mr. Kelly here in the audience would make sure that we get all the trees out of the way to get people out as soon as possible. But, he's already volunteered, by the way. He's got his chainsaw ready. But, I mean, the fact remains that there are concerns about day-to-day safety out there, regardless of whether the flooding is occurring. And so that's something that we can take another look at during the TIA. I will mention to council that there weren't any, when we did this originally, even at the higher level of trip generation, the higher number of units that were being proposed, there weren't any real capacity issues. So, making turn lane improvements to the intersection, that type of stuff, that wasn't warranted, but there was a concern about alternative access, particularly around the curve that you talked about.
There's actually 2 curves.
Mm-hmm.
Out of curiosity, when that traffic impact analysis study was performed, where were the lines put? Do you remember?
What lines are you referring to?
For the TIA, that you could count the trips of the cars. Where were they strategically placed? Do you remember?
They count, well, with the TIA, you typically count at intersections, and so they basically counted every intersection between the site and Marine Boulevard.
But that site is in the back.
Mm-hmm.
So you wouldn't really get a true analysis from a TIA.
They counted all of those internal intersections to Georgetown.
But the intersections are further out than where this particular project is going.
Well, I'm sorry, maybe I'm not being clear, but they counted every single intersection inside Georgetown. So every single stop sign, they counted every single intersection as part of the TIA. Now, what happened then?
Excuse me, did
Yes,
they
sir.
provide you the data on that?
Yes, sir. I don't have all that data with me, but I do have the findings of that TIA if you're interested. Now, the TIA that has been done, that was 2013, so we're talking 11 years ago. We would have to revisit the scope of that TIA with current day understanding to figure out what exactly needs to be analyzed to make sure that we're answering all the council's questions and doing the right thing as far as the traveling public.
Well, that's why you're going to have a TIA.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. That process has not been initiated yet, but it will be a requirement before construction occurs, yes.
I'm wondering if there's still a misunderstanding concerning what is intersection.
Okay.
Can you kind of mention the road, because you said inside of Georgetown?
Inside of Georgetown, anytime that there is a stop indication, that intersection was counted.
So,
regardless of how small the intersection is, regardless of how far into, the community is, it was counted and analyzed as part of the TIA.
So when I'm thinking of an intersection, I'm thinking of an intersection with possibly 4 stop signs.
It didn't have to be just a four-way stop. It's anything with a stop indication, which essentially means all intersections.
And do we know how many stop signs there are in this community?
In Georgetown? Not right offhand, but
Now, specifically, when we talk about Georgetown, just to get a clear understanding, are we talking about where First Baptist Missionary Church is, the road that possibly can go directly across with Onslow County Schools, or are we talking about once you make that left-hand turn at Onslow County Schools and you're going in the back, we're counting those roads?
We counted all of that, including all the intersections out on, what is it?
So we're talking about Georgetown and Broadhurst.
Broadhurst. I don't know if we counted Georgetown all the way out to Marine, but I know that we counted it right there at the intersection that you're talking about, next to the church.
Okay. Okay, I see what you're saying.
If I had a map, I'd draw it for you, but.
I got the visual, and based upon what Mayor Phillips says, a new one would have to be, but I'm just thinking right off the top of my head about the traffic of getting a clear picture, because, of course, if you were to eliminate ONWASA employees, the Board of Elections, the Onslow County Animal Shelter, Onslow County Schools, that's a significant amount of traffic that comes into the Georgetown area because of those employees. That can give a false sense of perception that there is a lot of traffic. But when you think about the churches, eliminating those basically when they're not in the community and just looking at the community members, because this community is less than 200 strong. And not many cars would necessarily trip with them. So I understand what you're saying with the, but at the same time, how true of an authentic data are you going to receive when you eliminate the individuals that don't live in the community that would increase and be a part of that TIA?
The traffic study does not do that. It accounts for every single trip that comes in and out of the entire area during peak hours. So that's generally, in this area, we generally look at 7 to 9 and 4 to 6. And so regardless if you work at ONWASA or whether you live in the Georgetown neighborhood, your vehicle is being counted.
Okay.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.
Jeremy, were you finished?
I was.
Okay.
I'd be happy to answer any more questions.
Any other questions, Jeremy? Okay. Thank you. All right, there's a public hearing on this matter, and before we begin the public hearing, I would like to read the rules that the council has adopted. You're asked to come to the lectern and to clearly state, preferably this lectern here, clearly state your name and address so that the clerk can properly enter it into the record. Each speaker will be allowed only one opportunity to speak, so please organize your thoughts before coming to the podium. We have allotted a maximum time per speaker of no more than 5 minutes. We request that groups designate a spokesperson to address the group's concerns. In the interest of time, we ask that if another speaker has already raised a point or addressed your concern, that it not be repeated. So with that, I will recess the regular council meeting, open the public hearing in this matter. Who would like to speak first? Ma'am.
My name is Tamika Brown. I live at 116 Stonemark Court here in Jacksonville, North Carolina. Good evening. I'm a native of the Georgetown community that dates back to 7 generations of us living today or has lived on the lands of Georgetown community. John L. Pierce and Associates on behalf of Thomas L. Hunter has submitted a request to rezoning a 35.9-acre parcel from residential to multifamily to Planning Development Residential PDR. This site is located at 398 Allison Hatchell Avenue, near the intersection of Allison Hatchell and Blue Claw Avenues. Approval will be subject to the PDM master plan and the PD terms and conditions. At the January 23, 2013 Planning Advisory Board recommended, Council denied the rezoning request based on findings of Fact C being found in the negative. Quote, Chairman Lasan stated his major concerns is getting people in and out of there. The streets need to be improved if they develop this. Hopefully the city will address these issues because these people deserve that. Homer Spring moved to deny the rezoning request based on the findings of Fact C being found in the negative. The impact of the adjudication property owners and surrounding community is reasonable and benefits of rezoning outweighs potentially harms and inconvenience the community. Vice Chairperson Sandra Warlick seconded the motion. The motion to deny the rezoning request based on finding C being found in the negative. The impact of the adjudication property owners in the surrounding community is reasonable, and the benefits of rezoning outweighs potential harms and inconvenience the community was approved by the board members present. The motion was voted by Vice Chairperson Sandra Warwick, Homer Spring, Teresa Van Deer, and Jim Dorn. These same concerns the board raised in 2013, the residents of the community raised and stressed in 2013, are still stressing 11 years later. Also in that same meeting, Abigail Barneman, senior planner for the city of Jacksonville, stated that during the summer of 2013, a dialogue/input meeting would take place with the Georgetown community, discuss the views and concerns for the community. And as of this date, no meeting has taken place. She's also on record in February and March meeting in 2013 stating the same thing. Ryan King discussed a TIA to be formed before any development can begin in January 2013. The TIA will not be a true TIA, as the highest traffic in the area will stop at Onwassa. As the only traffic in the area is the residents of this small community, school buses, mail carriers, city garbage trucks, and occasionally delivery drivers, and the Sunday church traffic. Imagine traffic with 220 homes, a marina, and boats coming in and out. Ms. Bannerman and Thomas Hunter both stated that the road of Covington will hold the traffic. Both she and he is on record in the meetings in the month of February and March. Covington Road is a dead end, but gave a view of this road being open to highway near the Department of Transportation. Not sure who would be responsible for this road to be built, as roads and infrastructures will cost in the billions. This road would also go through some of the unmarked and marked graves that are located throughout the community. However, the developer in 2024 states that Conover, Allison Hatchell, and Blue Call will be used as ways into Georgetown Landing. In February 2013, the City Council voted 5-1 to approve the development, which goes against the Planning Board concerns and the residents' concerns. Why even review the recommendations of the Planning Board if the Council will vote against them? The property went up for sale by the original owner, Thomas Hunter, and M&H Builders purchased this land in 2023. I have attended the meeting with the new developer that has taken place in the last 4 weeks, and we have stressed the same concerns with him. Some of those concerns are flooding, road use, mark, and ungrades. We are here today with the same concerns to the council. My question to this council is, when was the last time the roads in the community been measured to make sure that it could accommodate large construction traffic that would take place with this building of 200+ homes and other items that the new developer has requested for the land? The roads in question are the roads beyond Georgetown Road. What constitutes a minor change versus a major change from the original plans that were originally given from today's changes presented by the developer? In 2013, Dr. Hunter stated he wanted a marina, agricultural land, an urgent care, apartments, homes, and a gated community. Today, M&H also said something on the lines of a fence. Isn't that considered a gated community? What studies have been performed by the North Carolina Department of Transportation to weigh the trucks' sizes and weight limits for the roads in the Georgetown community? What studies have been performed by the North Carolina State of Archaeology for marked and unmarked graves in the Georgetown community? As before the community became city limits, this was used as our homestead and burial for our loved ones throughout the community. How would this building increase the property taxes and infrastructure of the roads for the residents in this small community? Will the residents still be able to afford to live on the lands that they have been in their family for generations? I encourage this board, before you make any decisions, take the time to review the minutes, videos of these concerns from 2013 meetings in which the planning board and the residents raised before allowing this development to take place. Thank you.
Who wants to go next?
Good evening, Council. My name is Tommy Baggett. I live at 536 Georgetown Road. I have a question for the council members. I've lived there for approximately 20 years now, and I've watched traffic and just the community grow as a whole. The roads back there have not been improved at all. I can say that I've messed up a tire going in between was it Laguna Bay and Allison Hatchell, and there's another road right there, I can't remember the name of it, but none of these concerns with the roads in Georgetown have been addressed. And I can't see any more heavy trucks because there's already building going on back there of some sort, and they come by my house. So now I have potholes or where the road dips off from where the big trucks are having to make turns, and they're tearing up my property. And if we have a storm right at the beginning of that curve, you have trees that fall. Just probably about 4 or 5 months ago, we had a tree fall across Georgetown Road. The entire community was out of power for probably about 12 hours. And no one could get in or out. And we're just like, okay, so once you bring in another 300, 400, 500 people and you have a 1-lane road going in, it's, for lack of a better word, we're just gonna be jammed in there. And when it comes down to flooding and different flooding and stormwater, I live right there. I'm probably 200 yards from the water. And I see the water coming up. And I'm wondering, when they start building, when you have the grade of where they're going to build from, where is the water from that new community? Where is it going to go? Especially if it's raining and we have intense rain like Florence or any other intense rain, the water's going to come back into Georgetown, and then it has nowhere to go. I think we have one retention pond in Georgetown, and that's by the Trent River Oak Grove, and that's like a marsh. So I see it as there are too many safety hazards to bring in another 600 people into that one little area, and the infrastructure that Georgetown has now, just that small community, it's barely keeping up. So I just saw the other day, and it's probably been 10 years, they were clearing out the ditches right on Georgetown Road, and I thought it was mighty convenient, just right before the city council meeting, that they come out there and they start digging. And I'm like, well, what is this? You know, I haven't seen anybody doing any upgrades to Georgetown. I remember when they put street lights in Georgetown, and it's been within the 20 years that I have lived there. I remember when Georgetown was a dirt road and no one wanted to live back there. And now you have, different families moving in. And if there are two city vehicles back there at the same time, if you have a garbage truck and a recycling truck, you're late for work. So I just want to put that forward to the council. It's already crowded back there for what we have. Unless they can find another way to, I don't know, get back there, then I can't see anybody building anything else back there. Thank you.
Is there a survey been done on that site?
Sorry, sir.
Has there been a survey on the site to determine the water flow?
So with a planned development residential, it does not get that far into your civil drawings or stormwater and whatnot. I am not made aware that there has been a drainage study or anything like that done on the property. It would be part of the site plan and subdivision.
Would be on
review.
the site plan?
Yes.
Okay, so we haven't reached that stage
No,
yet.
sir. Just to add some clarification, the PDR, a master plan, is essentially a concept. It's a conceptual, a bubble plan.
On that plan, it showed ponds and everything on there, correct?
Right, and those are just, they're shown there for representation. They could change location. It's just, they're shown currently where, based on the topography of the land, may be the best spot, but they may not end up there.
Right.
That'll all be handled at the staff level through site plans and subdivision review.
Mr. Smith, before you sit down, I have two questions to ask you
Yes, ma'am.
about the streets. So with Georgetown Road, do you know what the width dimensions of that street is?
Of Georgetown Road, I do not without being able to measure it with the GIS system.
And not even in the curves, those two curves?
I'm not aware.
All right.
I wouldn't even want to give you misinformation.
The second question, do we currently know what the axle weight for Georgetown Road? In other words, what is the weight, the maximum weight that a vehicle can weigh traveling on Georgetown Road?
I'm unaware of that. I do not know.
Okay. Is there any kind of bonding or anything as far as damage to streets by construction vehicles? Is there such a thing?
Mayor, if we have contractors that are coming in on streets, they can be held accountable for any type of damage that they do to the street. The concept back to Mr. Smith related to what the weight is and the capacity on those, we can pull that up. There's typically a state standard in your design standard when you're building those streets, but Wally's team would be able to look and see what the standard they've been built towards.
Those streets were probably built before we adopted the minimum standard.
Correct. And so if you have anything that's done prior to bringing into the city limits, then we wouldn't be able to verify that standard of the construction unless we had as-built. If we have any type of modifications or improvements done to those streets, then we would know what kind of load capacity based on what we've done on improvements. But the challenge there, Mayor, is not knowing the what's under the street, depending on how those roads were built. But I'll check with Wally just to look back and see if we have any kind of information back to Dr. Washington's point.
Mr. Ray, piggybacking off of Mayor Phillips' question. Second question. I know we're talking about the city road, but my question is, for a lot of the residents that live in Georgetown, their mailboxes is on their private property that is almost side by side with the public road. So for example, if you have a truck that's coming down the road and they have to move off on the side of the road and damage somebody's easement or run over their mailbox or fracture their driveway, what compensation is there? Because then those trucks will be coming onto private property and not city property. So how does the homeowners be compensated for that damage to their properties? And here's another question. If it's private property, do you need their permission for your truck? If this is the highway, Georgetown Road, and my house is right here, and you come over here and you fracture my driveway, now you're on my private property. That's trespassing.
Let me give you two answers. Actually, the first answer is all I can give you, Dr. Washington, and then Mr. Carter can have the legal side of it. The staff side of it is you do have a right-of-way for a street for a reason, and that shows where the vehicles are going to go. Typically, you want those vehicles to stay on the street, but if they do go outside of there, that's why we restrict where you can put your trees, where you can put landscaping, where you can put your mailbox. You should put that outside of the rights-of-way. However, that doesn't always happen. So if you have damage that occurs inside of the street right-of-way, then you're going to have some challenge, and that's just what we've dealt with in the past. In terms of the legal avenue, I can't give you that one. So
there's probably many mailboxes that are in the right of way. because the right-of-way, as we know, extends up into our yards in many, many cases. If a truck damages a person's mailbox, then that's a civil action that person could take against that company, truck driver, or actually there. So it would be between the two of them. That's certainly nothing that the city is condoning by allowing a project to go forward. That is, a truck could run off the road anywhere and hit a mailbox and knock it down, and I think that homeowner would have the right to sue or to seek compensation from the truck driver insurance company.
Okay.
And my third answer, Dr. Washington, is here's Wally.
I think I heard most of your questions. I was listening in, preparing for our presentation later tonight. I'll start with how the roads were constructed. The roads were constructed when Georgetown was originally in the county and then annexed. Many of those roads have been resurfaced over the years. I don't have the exact dates. I've pulled some of that resurfacing and sent it in. But the heaviest thing, we send our garbage trucks to the landfill every day. They're typically right around the weight limit that's allowed on public streets. The garbage trucks transverse, through Georgetown every week. I won't say that they don't create any damage. It does happen over time. But there's also a frequency. They're not going every day, multiple times a day. So I would expect with any heavy construction, you would probably see some type of damage to existing city streets. We saw that to Carolina Forest as they were building out Carolina Forest subdivision. It does happen. As far as I know, we do not have any bonding requirements that actually require somebody to bond improvements for off-site damage. And we have run into this a couple of times where a project has damaged off-site. We typically work with that contractor, and most of them are very good to work with in getting any damage that they created to city infrastructure replaced, including cracked sidewalks or damaged curb and gutter, those kind of things. But I don't know of any requirement for bonding off-site. We do have requirements for bonding infrastructure on-site, so infrastructure that's either proposed that would be turned over to the city, such as water, sewer, streets, or stormwater. Those improvements are bonded, and that is to ensure that they're constructed. So if I had to guess, and that's all it is, and Mr. Carter would probably tell me I shouldn't, those streets were probably constructed on 6 inches of gravel and 2 inches of asphalt, because that was a DOT standard that dated back to the 60s and 70s, and in many cases they still allow it on residential streets today. The city standard is a little more than that. It's 8 and 2, and then if it's a residential collector, there is a different requirement. I think it's 8, 4, and 2, or 8, 4, and 1.5. It changed from 2. So that would be 8 inches of rock, 4 inches of a heavier asphalt, and then 1.5 inch of a surface course. So most of the streets in our area are typically constructed on the 8 and 2 that you see. 8 inches of rock, 2 inches of asphalt. And it does hold up very well unless you get repetitive, heavy truck traffic.
So do we know what the axle weight is?
I would say that you could drive anything that you could legally drive on any city street, which I think is 66,000 pounds gross vehicle weight.
Okay. So, for example, Country Club where I live, there's an axle weight maximum, 6.5.
6.5
tons. So that's almost about like 14,000 pounds. So with that being said, because there is a regulatory sign that's up on Country Club, so Would a vehicle, 14,000 pounds, could Georgetown basically accommodate?
I'm not aware of that. It's a DOT street, but I'm not aware of that sign.
Georgetown is a DOT street?
I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not aware of the sign on Country Club.
Oh, yeah.
But Georgetown's a city street, and we don't have any weight ratings on any of our streets. And I think we only have a few that have, we typically sign it no through truck traffic, or in some cases where we've had tractor trailers repeatedly damage city sidewalks, we make them go in a different entrance. An example would be the intersection of Williamsburg Plantation and Gum Branch Road. They have to, if they're delivering, they have to go around and come in the road off of Western Boulevard behind Food Lion.
But you would have to admit, Georgetown is a little bit different because there's only, a lack of a better word, barely you can get two vehicles side by side without almost kissing one another.
It is very narrow.
So if you're having vehicles, multiple vehicles weighing over 14,000 pounds along with the other day-to-day traffic, those roads are going to be fractured, which basically means when your team has to come out and to repair, now you're going to be down to one lane because you're going to have to give that road time to repair itself. And then it's only a matter of time before that stress fracture happens again, and your budget is going to go to repairing those roads.
I agree, there's definitely going to be
if the weight issue is not addressed, it's going to be a problem. And if you're down to one lane going in and going out of Georgetown, as Mr. Jackson said, that is a safety issue.
And because the width of the roads aren't, up to current standards anyway.
And God forbid.
It's going to be a smaller, it's not going to be a full.
If someone needs 911, it's one thing to say that we have a response team that can be there within the blink of an eye, and I'm glad we have that. But if it's your loved one that needs that help, and that community is now restricted, there is no amount of apologies that can erase how this community is going to feel. Because until it happens to you, you may empathize, you may support, you may give your condolences and your cajoling, but until it is you, you don't know how it feels. And trust and believe, no one wants to be in that position to find out how it feels.
Mayor, this year we did change, Wally's team did add the emergency access. If you recall, we had that discussion about making emergency access coming off behind the park. So if we have some kind of situation where the bend that we're referencing coming into Georgetown is blocked for any reason, then we have emergency access.
Through the cemetery?
Through the, not over the cemetery, behind the park, there's the trail, and we created that width, and it does give us sufficient width so we can have emergency vehicles access that area. If you recall, the request was for us to make basically make a removable bollard situation so we can have a secondary access. And back to the comment earlier about people not coming in until the development was approved. Development's been approved since 2013, and we did this past year. Nothing to do with that. It's because the comment was made we need to have a secondary access. So that's in place now, and I agree with you. We don't want to respond after the fact. So we're ahead of the game if we have an emergency response situation to not go around one road, but to go around the second.
Is that accessible now?
It's accessible right now.
Not to private vehicles, but to emergency.
Just like
But it's not open to the community.
bypass.
Correct.
It's just like in Branch, correct?
It's not open to the community.
That's beside the old cemetery?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. The cemetery, if you were to come in that direction, the old cemetery would be on your left, and the large cemetery would come right into the end of a, well, where Erastus makes the 90-degree turn. So, and I would expect there, if that many, concrete trucks running out, there will be damage that will have to be repaired. That happens a lot on our streets.
But not many of your residents can just hire a lawyer and take somebody to court. That's easier said than done.
Well, those are city streets you're talking about.
We would fix them, we would repair them.
Property.
Thank you, Wally.
I got a question for Ryan right quick.
Ryan?
Yes, sir.
You remember, you showed me a map where you could show certain scenarios?
Yes, sir.
For flooding? Can you pull that up in here?
I cannot.
Okay.
But it's basically at Darden and Georgetown Road. That's the area where there's a ditch that, based on the flood examples that I shared with you that one day, that if you get to a 13-foot storm surge situation, that road would be impassable. It would actually become impassable sooner than that. With Florence, you had 7.27 feet of flooding in the river based on the gauges, and that road was covered with water right there near Darden Street.
Mr. King, since this map is up and we have Erectus Road, can you show us where that service road is?
It's up here under the W in Georgetown, is as I understand it. Let me see if I can find another map that's zoomed out a little bit differently.
First slide.
There you go.
Yeah, it's basically underneath the, just north of the W. It comes into the park.
Comes behind the park.
Okay, because that's the cemetery right there.
It's the existing bike trail that goes into the park and where the Board of Elections is located.
Because the cemetery is the circle, right?
Right.
I didn't understand.
The largest cemetery is the circle.
Yes, sir. The cemetery is the larger circle.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Let's get back to listen to what our citizens have to say. Can we, who wants to go next? Reverend Milton?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Reverend Milton. I live at 6608 Chatham Park Drive, Brandywine, Maryland. Currently, my new address is 1234 Georgetown. From being pushed off of their land at Camp Lejeune, Mumford Point, to Georgetown, from the bombing of our school on graduation morning, May 29, 1966, to the city landfill being placed in the Georgetown community by the approval of the city government, which is believed to have attributed to the poisoning of our water, to derelict Jacksonville City Police who used their billy clubs to beat citizens of the Georgetown community without cause, whom they swore to protect, to the constant neglect of the city government to fulfill its obligation and duties as elected officials, to ensure that all of its residents live in thriving neighborhoods with access to safe roads, well-lit streets, access to city amenities by providing city transportation, not just in some neighborhoods, not just in the neighborhoods where the majority of the council lives, but in all neighborhoods. It is the obligation of the city to ensure that each neighborhood be provided adequate entry and exit points to ensure the safety of its residents, especially in emergency situations. Currently in the Georgetown community, there is only one way in and one way out. I've driven in neighborhoods where the majority of the council lives, and there are multiple entry and exit points. The Georgetown community needs to be afforded the same. To the blatant disrespect and denial of the Georgetown residents to voice their concerns in opposition to this plan by a pompous and directed chairman at the planning board meeting that was held on October 14th, when this plan comes up before council tonight for approval, let us be fair and impartial and remove all sense of malfeasance from this process tonight. Let us not fail the residents of Georgetown as the planning board did at the meeting held on October 14th. This plan that comes before council for approval tonight is an extreme derivation from the original plan. Whereas the original plan had 8 elements, this derivation has 3 elements, which is more than a 50% reduction from the original plan. And I believe that this calls for a brand new plan, for a new plan. Mr. Ryan King, can you pull up the county PUD so that we can see for ourselves what it states in regards to this, in regards to what was done in 2013 and what is being proposed by MHM tonight?
Mr. Mayor, that's not appropriate. It's up to the mayor and council to direct the staff.
Okay, can I ask Mr. Mayor, can you ask him to pull it up for us so we can see for ourselves?
Attachment H. Pardon? Attachment H is the original approved plan.
If this plan is approved, Mr. Mayor, and allowed to proceed, it will have a devastating effect on the residents of the Georgetown community. The residents have lived in this community all of their lives, who in complete accord and unity have stated their disdain for this project because they understand that this is simply an attempt to force them out of their community. And because of the unaffordability of affordable housing in the county, they would have no place to go. Mr. Mayor and Council, just like you cannot account for all of the residents who were displaced because of the New River housing community being condemned, by approving this plan tonight would only add to the number of displaced residents of the county. If you deem it necessary to consider this project for approval, knowing the position of which the residents have taken against it, as elected officials, you'll be felling the residents of the Georgetown community, you'll be felling them. And they have become accustomed to that. One thing that needs to be taken into consideration amongst many is that there needs to be an archaeological study or soil test done by an independent agency of the state of North Carolina to ensure that this project, if approved, is not disturbing the final resting place of many of our ancestors who are buried throughout our community. Because in time past, African Americans were not allowed to be buried in white cemeteries. Because this was the case, many property owners in the Georgetown community would allow residents to bury their loved ones on their properties. Prior to annexation, the Georgetown community was self-sufficient and thriving. Post-annexation, we have had and are experiencing a myriad of problems, worst of which is this ungodly attempt by a developer and its cowardly shadow investors who are willing to sell their souls for $1 and are void of conscience. For more than a year, I've been coming before this council asking for infrastructure upgrades within the Georgetown community, which they so rightly deserve, being taxpayers. Tonight, I can report that there has been minimal effort to address our request. I recently sat in a meeting with you, Mr. Mayor, city manager, assistant city manager, and our ward representative, where you explicitly told the city manager to move our request to the top of his list, of his to-do list, and to give our request priority. Yet the infrastructure changes that are so desperately needed in our community remain undone. I pray, Mr. Mayor, that you are not just giving me lip service or trying to appease me. I can assure you, Mr. Mayor and Council, that I am in this for the long haul. And I'm very resilient, and I'm going nowhere until I see all the infrastructure upgrades done within the Georgetown community. Again, I sat in these chambers with the mayor when the mayor and council approved the development of 400 acres of land off of Gun Branch Road, which was purchased with taxpayer funds. The estimate, not the total cost, but the estimate of the project was estimated at $155 million. Some, if not all, taxpayer dollars. The infrastructure changes in Georgetown must be done. Good, safe, and passable roads, adequate entry and exit roads, adequate lighting throughout the community. Currently, our children have to stand in total darkness at 5:30 in the morning waiting to catch the school bus to school because of a lack of bus drivers, proper drainage, a city bus stop. How long, Mr. Mayor? How long must we wait? What is it? Can somebody tell me, what is it that prohibits you all from meeting the needs of the residents of Georgetown? It can't be because of a lack of funds. It definitely isn't because of a lack of manpower. Could it be it is because it is the oldest, predominantly African-American community in the county? Or maybe things are on hold because of the anticipation of it no longer being an African-American community, but a waterfront community that is home to some of you and the cowardly shadow investors who behind the scene are financing this project.
Who wants to speak next?
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor and council persons. My name is Carmen Kuntz Spicer. My address is 59 Kerr Street, Jacksonville, 28540. Thank you for allowing me to say a few words. I'm going to make the comment, I'm not a resident of Georgetown. However, I'm a resident right across the water on Kerr Street. And I was observing, sometimes you have to sit back and observe, and what came in my spirit was, are you listening? Are you listening? Are you listening? Reverend Milton said, more than a year, he's commuted from Maryland to Jacksonville, his hometown of Georgetown, asking for requests. He doesn't even live here, but he's concerned about his community and residents, and we don't call it a neighborhood, we call it a residence or community. And he said that, Reverend Milton, said that little has been done based upon the requests that he has made. Now, I had the opportunity to observe, and I looked at the requests of other things, items being requested, and the time seemed like a shorter period of time. Now, I don't want to think that as a taxpayer, because we all pay taxes here, that there is some injustice. I know I've said to you before, I say it to you again, we can do better. You are going to have to do better because people are watching. They're listening and they're watching. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. So I want to thank you for what you have done. There's always room to be thankful. But I know you can do a lot better. And I do believe most of you are believers. Come on now. Christians, believers, brothers and sisters, love one another. And is this how we show our love? We can do better. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Who else wishes to speak?
Before Reverend Hardison speak, I want to address Mr. Ray. I discussed with you concerning the bus stop near the actually near the park. What did you come up? You and Anthony come up with?
Mayor, so we've looked at the 2 bus stops that we have now that are right there at the park. Those will be sheltered bus stops, just like the one that was completed on, I think that one's on Broadhurst, that we just did the full covering benches bus stop. And so those are 2 on the side of the road there, one on the school side and one on the opposite side of the road. Those will both be updated as well. Those are additional stops that are coming through. So we all look at route generation and the times for those. We've had that discussion multiple times. So right now we have those that'll be improved as stops, and then they'll look to see about the times to do any additional locations.
Reverend Hardison.
Reverend Luther Hardison on 516 Georgetown Road, Jacksonville. And I had brought up, it's been mentioned, as far as our draining system, and I know Mr. Ray and our councilman came and looked at it, and where the city's drain is, I am no more than 25, 50 feet from that drain. I can't get the water to move from my yard to the drain because of something that was in place before Jacksonville became the city limits. So we are still paying city and county taxes. We don't have nothing to do with the county. I had an emergency at my house, and you got a EMS right at the fire department in Georgetown, and I had to wait for somebody to come from across the river to come see about me. I'm paying county taxes. So as far as the ditch, you said that because the ditch wasn't in place when it was county, that you can't do anything about it. I have to dig my own ditch, and you'll maintain it. Well, I was raised at 215 Georgetown Road, right in front of the Onslow County Board of Education. I remember that was a ditch. We couldn't drive out of our yard straight into the Board of Education because of the ditch. And there was a ditch between Board of Education and what was Georgetown School. You didn't drive through there. Now I could turn around in front of 215 Georgetown Road, drive in the little ditch and drive out and keep going. It ain't been maintained. So I don't really care about the maintenance of the ditches. And, it was mentioned that, because of the city council meeting today, we see some action in the ditches in Georgetown. I would rather have a ditch than your sidewalks. Give me my ditch so I can run some water. I'll do my own sidewalk. And as far as the roads in Georgetown, Councilman Washington, I fill you with that 14,000 pounds. That's a 2-axle vehicle with no weight on it. I drive a mixer every day, 36,000 pounds empty. My tandems do not turn. I'm tearing up roads all day, every day. We talk about Georgetown, they say 8 inches of rock, 2 inches of asphalt. We talking about Georgetown 25, 30 years ago. Go find 8 inches of rock under those 2 inches of asphalt in Georgetown. You're not gonna find it. So, and I challenge anybody on the council, drive through Georgetown while the school bus is coming through. You don't have to wait for no construction vehicles, just a school bus. And see, don't you have to leave the road or they gonna pull off the road. It's not wide enough to accommodate anything that they trying to do. We asked him about helping us with the ditches. We asked him to handle city problems. I think we can do better. I think we spend more time and money into coming up with ways how to tell the Georgetown community no than we do spending time trying to get something done in Georgetown.
Anyone? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing in this matter. Council, you're being asked to approve the planned agreement. The zoning, I'm sorry. Master plan and terms and conditions is what you're approving. What you.
These are modifications to a previously approved plan?
Yes.
Because they were already approved for a lot higher density than what they're currently proposing.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's actually a reduction by over half. I think it's important too, just to note that, I was having a conversation prior to the meeting with the gentleman in the audience, and this is one of those things where, the landowner, if they meet the zoning requirements, has legal and constitutional rights to do what they want with their land. Nobody can come on my house and tell me on my land and tell me I have to tear down my house or paint it pink or whatever, and I can't do that to anyone else. And so there's rights on both sides and concerns, for sure, concerns we hear. But the ship on whether this happened or not sailed in 2013. So at this point, do we take, a lesser impact over the full impact that was originally planned? Well, in theory, lesser impact would be a step of improvement. It may not be the answer everyone wants, but it's certainly better than double the occupancy, double the homes, and double the traffic. So it won't alleviate problems, but we also have an obligation to, make decisions based on fact and law. And if the zoning requirements are met and the requirements and studies are done, and I'm glad to see the archaeological component, outside of the physical building and development, the legacy and history of Georgetown and the high school and the history of that whole neighborhood is incredibly important to who Jacksonville is, and it needs to be preserved. But as a council, I can tell you legally, we can't preserve anyone's private property, no matter who they are or where they live, simply because when I die and my kids get my house, they can either keep it or they can sell it, and what they do with it is up to them. And that's true of any homeowner or landowner. So a lot of what will happen in Georgetown to the current homes outside of, some of we hear the concerns, and I know the narrow roads they were built a long time ago and they were built too narrow. So there's concerns. But the preserving the community as it is really going to fall into the shoulders of the heirs of the property owners now, because they are going to decide whether they sell or stay, keep or build or regenerate, revitalize. That's up to them. But we have to deal with, this is already approved from 2013 to proceed with a heavier concentration. So if we approve this tonight, it doesn't solve all the problems or address all the challenges, and yes, repairs will be required to streets, and same thing happens when you close Court Street or you close any street in any neighborhood for work. It's inconvenient, it's difficult, it's no fun, and it will be a pain for the duration of any repair. But it's unfortunately the price we sometimes pay for any development anywhere. Anyway, my 2 cents on this is, while I hear the concerns and I know this is not a desirable thing for everyone, legally there is grounds for it to proceed, and the boat sailed in 2013 on whether it could or couldn't. The question is today is, do we do it all or do we do less?
Mr. Massey, Mr. Carter, I have a question to ask you. Back in 2013, when this issue came before council, I do believe it was Mayor Pro Tem Lazara asked you about the transferring of the property. And to my recollection, the conversation included that the original plan would go whomever the new developer is. However, there was some latitude if minor changes took place in the plan. So my question to you legally for this particular zoning, what constitutes minor changes versus major changes but a whole brand new plan?
This plan does get transferred with the property, just as you stated.
Yes, sir.
And I don't recall the discussion about minor tweakings, but I think if there's any relevance to that, it's kind of like what Mr. Smith was talking about. You saw a bubble plan, as he called it, where the stormwater pond is here, but it may be over here when it's actually built. Those are the kind of tweaks. The movement here from 400 and some units down to 200 is not a minor tweak. It would need council's approval. Does that help?
Yes. With that being said, there's an adage that talks about half a loaf is better than no loaf at all, right? The only problem is if that half a loaf is molded bread, you're talking about something that you can't use. And this is a very touchy subject for many people sitting in this room. And it's a very touchy subject on so many different levels. To the point where some can empathize what somebody's reality has been. We heard a young lady speak tonight that talked about her family has lived on this land for 7 generations. And when they came to this land, it wasn't because of their choosing. It was because they was displaced. Now, the term eminent domain wasn't something that individuals would use on a day-to-day conversation back in the 1940s. Because this young lady, when she spoke, she has rights that her ancestors long ago didn't have, that was pushed off their original land. And even when they went to Georgetown, it wasn't the best of the best. As a matter of fact, when they were given compensation for their land, they wasn't given the due compensation that their land on Camp Lejeune, Montfort Point, was worth. They was given less than, only to be relocated to land that's a lesser land. But these generations of families took what was given to them because they had no recourse, and they made the best that they could possibly make. They're talking about what it is like to be a citizen. This model talks about being a caring community. Okay, so what does that mean? It can have a different connotation and a different definition depending on who you are. Exactly what is caring? And for some, they do not see this as caring. They see it as a continuation of what their ancestors faced back in the 1930s, 40s, when they were pushed off their land. They can tell you about the railroad that went through the heart of Georgetown and how they had to time their activity so they wasn't on the trestle at the same time the train was coming and end up having to jump off for the sake of their lives. The city used to have a dump. Imagine you having to endure the smell of human garbage. But this happened in this community. Sometimes we hear the term PTSD, and we oftentimes only want to attach it to the military. But there is also PTSD that happens in neighborhoods. And for this community, this is what it feels like. It's a constant reminder of feeling that you have something only to feel like it's getting ready to be stripped away from you. Many of the residents cannot afford the new homes that are being proposed, let alone the rents with the apartments. They can't afford it. Even if they sell their land and try to go someplace else in the city, we already have a housing crisis. So even if they sold their land, they couldn't take that money and find another piece of land and build a house for that same amount of money that they've sold the land for. So now you're talking about homelessness. Or if you can't afford it, for some of these residents, they're in their 40s, they're in their 50s. Who wants to go in debt for the next 30 years? As a matter of fact, she's not sitting in the audience, but Mrs. Matlock is one of the oldest residents in Georgetown, and if I'm not mistaken, is she 93, 94? 93. Not too far from being a century. Her eyes have seen something. The residents are asking us to listen. Or better yet, the residents are asking us just for a moment, step in their shoes. Imagine if this was the reversal. Imagine if the people out here in Georgetown, Mr. Carter, look like you, and the majority of the people on this council look like me. They would want us not only to be compassionate, but they will want us to empathize. And you're right, Mrs. Edwards. Change is going to happen. Some way, somehow, change is going to happen. But you don't profit off of the backs of innocent people. That you don't do. That you don't do. How many, I've been on this council next month, starting my 14th year. And I am trying to think to my hardest, Mr. Carter, what community in the city of Jacksonville have come before us that resemble the Georgetown community and is asking for us to do the right thing? I haven't. I haven't.
Dr. Watson, you've made it personal to me. So basically, the council's decision tonight is, let's deny this request. And let's roll the dice and see if this developer will build 440, or whatever the magic number is, units.
It's, regardless of what it is, it doesn't make it right.
No, and that you can't make it right because, as Ms. Edwards pointed out, the ship sailed in 2013, one way or the other, possibly. But that's kind of where y'all are at, and it's not a good place to be. Yes, sir.
Well, and I sit on the planning board, so we had this meeting last month, and I recognize some of y'all's faces in here. And, you know, one thing that we talked about was the concerns of the roads. We get that. But I feel like what we have here is two different problems. We got the map amendment. That's what we're here for tonight. Mm-hmm. And then we have the roads. Two different issues. And we do have to separate those. I know that's hard to do, but that's just what it is. I do agree with that. Yes, sir. I don't know who said that, but okay. I didn't see you.
No conversation, please.
But anyways, so I do agree we have issues with the roads, and I do agree, but I do not feel like we can change our opinion on this map amendment based off of all this information. So I do make a proposal to approve the map amendment tonight.
I would like to speak on the issue.
Please, Mr. Jackson.
One of my concerns is that certain things wasn't taken into consideration at the time. I do understand that it's better to have an impact of 200 or so than 400 families. I do get that. But there were certain things that was not considered at that particular time. As you say, I know that ship had sailed. But unfortunately...
The roads were still the same roads then, correct?
Right. But like I said, the impact would have been greater at that, if we kept that, than what we have right now. We have to deal with the issue because DOT is not going to change the roads coming into Georgetown. At some point, we're going to have to address that as a city.
And let's be clear, 2013, the planning board 4-3 denied that project.
But the planning board this year approved it.
Of course. But when you said back when it happened, so nothing has changed because what the residents was talking about was still the same issues that the planning board supported them
So the project was denied.
by the planning board, but it still had to come before
The
council.
council approved it.
And yes,
Okay.
Planning board is a referral.
I totally understand what
So
the
that's what it is.
issues, I mean, listen, I get that, okay? I get everything you say. I also am a liaison to a committee. I get that it is a referral, okay?
Okay.
That's no need to explain that to me. Going back to what I was saying, unfortunately, I couldn't amend this. You know, I spoke to Mr. Ray about this. I spoke to Mr. Massey about this. I couldn't amend this to add the issue with safety. It was not considered at the time, evidently. I will not approve this in protest, even though the safety issue is still at hand. But, you know, this is about reducing. Like I said, I believe it's a better issue concerning impact because we're going to have less numbers. But it still is a problem, and it's a problem that it wasn't considered then. You know, I think about when they talk about, it was mentioned about Georgetown. I remember there was a guy talking about Red Eye Cinema, and it was, they always talk about warehouse sales on the wrong side of the tracks. So I can't help but think about historically what has happened in Jacksonville. Many of the issues I did have before I left, you know, I know they're still here. We do have to do better as we go forward. I don't know if we could do stuff in the UDO concerning safety going forward or what we can do to amend some things so we won't have these problems in the future. I hope that the heirs that still have their property, if they want to keep the Georgetown they do have at this point, that they do what they need to do to come together to keep those properties. But as it was said, that we do have to have a heart going forward with what we do. I do agree with that. I just hate that in 2013, when this decision was made by council, that I don't know if it was brought out or considered when it was approved, that you did not take the, you know, the possible safety impact concerning one way in and one way out at the particular time.
I did.
So how was that?
I did.
Okay. But not enough did. But that's all, man. That's all.
I'll move the question.
We haven't got a motion yet. Mr. Sosa was ready to make a motion.
He made a motion.
I made a motion to approve the map amendment about the map amendment.
And I seconded it.
All right, I'm sorry I missed that. Let me make one point, Mr. Mayor, as far as whether there's fencing or no fencing. This plan presently calls for no fencing. As you heard the developer speak to you, he wanted to do that on a one-on-one basis with the different property owners. That's between him and them. That is not part of the requirement at all. I want to make sure that is clear to the council. If that's an issue for council, you need to address it at this time. If not, then move forward with your vote.
Not an issue for me.
It would be an issue for me because the property owners,
But it's no different than any other
that
development.
can be hit or miss. You can choose not to, you can say, I will, and
But if you live in any other neighborhood, Carolina
we're
Forest,
not talking about
Northwood,
this neighborhood, we're talking about Georgetown.
all right. Fencing.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Now we can open up discussion. Anybody else wants to discuss this matter?
So it's a possibility that there could be fences, a fence in one area, and then you have shrubbery in another area, side by side.
I think that's what that man, the representative
Mr.
offered up.
Spencer.
Yes.
I think the intent there is not to force everyone to have a fence if they don't want their view
If they
blocked.
don't want it, they don't have to have it.
Depends on what the property owner
Basically
wants.
what it was.
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it is
It does.
interesting, but.
Request that I don't have to have a fence behind my home?
Public
Is
comment.
that a factual statement?
Would you address his concern, please?
Yes, the president. That I don't want a fence behind my home? The president plan does not call for a fence to be behind your home. Now, if this gentleman wants to put a fence on his property, I believe he can put a fence on his property, but presently he has said that, sir, you okay?
Back down, please, sit down, please.
But,
please sit down. Public comments over for now. I can't. He does.
Did I answer the question, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please.
That the present plan does not call for any fencing. It's just a vegetative buffer, 20 feet, I believe is correct. That's what the plan calls for.
Okay.
If the plan is approved, you can always come back for a modification at a later time.
Always possible, Mr. Vick.
Okay. But right
So if
now-
the plan is approved, there can be modifications?
It would have, again, it would have to come back before the council like this, and I don't know that that's going to happen. But anything can happen. There could be a modification requested in the future, just as this, pursuant like a map amendment always.
We still have a TIA and the archaeological study
Yes.
to go as well, and final plans aren't drawn. This is very
Correct.
early in the process of what it actually will be on the ground.
Please address his concern, though, about that.
Yes, sir, we will.
I'll
talk to him after.
the
We'll
meeting.
talk.
Yes, sir.
Vote.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Nay.
For the record, it's 4-2.
4-2.
Yes, sir.
All right. All right, so we'll move on to reports at this time, and I'll start with you, Dr. Washington. Oh,
It's got moved up after number 7.
they all got me all kind of messed up here.
Reports is right.
No, we moved to one city moment after number 7.
No,
And reports.
I got it. Reports are,
Oh, okay.
we'll start with you, Dr. Washington.
No report.
Ms. Edwards?
No report, sir.
Mr. Ward? Mr. Jackson?
No report.
No report.
No report.
Okay. With that, your one city moment, please.
Thank you, Mayor. We have one city moment for this evening, so appreciate the opportunity here to get us going. As part of Veterans and Military Family Appreciation Month, we did have our Veterans Parade that happened this past week. Great event, good turnout for the community. You'll notice here on Saturday, we had the Marine Corps Band, we had our local high school bands, we had our Boy Scout troops, and then we were able to have Public Services and Jacksonville Police Department. Part of the celebration is to bring out people to celebrate our veterans at this time, and then the best part for us is we followed up with a second holiday parade coming up in the same area. So very exciting. If this is not the way you want to finish a parade with sanitation coming down the end of the road, I don't know what better method to make it happen. But we are excited to have Veterans Awareness Month here for families and for those veterans. It's a time for us to appreciate those who have served our community and our country. And in a military host city, I think it's something that we should do more often than not. That's all I had, Mayor.
All right, with that, we're going to go ahead and go to talk about this other two items in the A and B. So with that, we'll move.
You have my blessing.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, are we ready?
Let's go. All right. Let's go to item number 8, I think it is on the agenda. 8. This is housing policy development. We have our folks from DFI here with us. We'll start with Tracy. You can introduce everybody.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council, for the opportunity to have this third and final presentation from Defense Finance Initiative with Chapel Hill. We have the third presentation, but as you recall, we had the first presentation of the definition of affordable housing. They did a deep dive into that, and then the second presentation gave a very informative needs assessment. And now the DFI team, they're going to be bringing us the recommendations for the development of affordable housing and helping with our housing policy development. So without further delay, I'm going to be inviting Ms. Sarah Van Leer up to the table. And also we have Marcia Parrott, and in his absence, their team member, Mr. Frank Maraca. So we're gonna have Ms. Sarah come up.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy. And thanks so much for having me back. We're excited to be here. And I'm gonna give them the cue to go to the next slide. So today we'll be, as Tracy mentioned, we'll be reviewing our final recommendations for our current scope of work with you, which is reviewing the site suitability and financial feasibility approaches for affordable housing development in Jacksonville. We'll discuss those high-level housing opportunity findings for the specific sites that we've identified, and then spend a little bit of time on next steps. All right, next slide. And I'll apologize in advance. I'm chewing on a cough drop and hoping not to cough through this presentation. I'm not giving anybody any germs, but just trying to shake this this cough that's sticking with me. As the mayor mentioned, and as Tracy mentioned, we're the Development Finance Initiative. We're a program of UNC School of Government, and we work with local governments all across the state to help them bring about transformative real estate projects to their communities that are meeting targeted community needs and identified public interests in their region. In this case, we're focused on affordable housing. And we've seen a real uptick in the request for support and thinking through affordable housing development opportunities all across the state. So you're not alone in kind of thinking through the housing solutions that are needed in your community. Next slide. This is just a quick reminder of our scope and kind of where we've been with you all. As Tracy mentioned, we, last time we were here, worked through our housing market and needs assessment with you, incorporating the stakeholder feedback that we've received along the way. And today we're here to talk about specific sites that we've identified and the high-level site and financial feasibility results that we anticipate on those sites. Next slide. So first, just as a quick reminder, I know we were just here talking about your housing market, but I just want to spend a little bit of time on those key takeaways. So first bullet is, despite the significant economic growth that the city has experienced here, your housing supply has lagged over the last decade. Next bullet. Housing development rates here are at the scale for cities that are less than 1/10 of the size of Jacksonville. In addition to that, Jacksonville hasn't recovered yet from Hurricane Florence, so you've kind of further constrained, you're experiencing a further constrained housing market as a result of that storm. Projected household growth, we think, may further the pressure on Jacksonville's current housing market. And then finally, the constrained housing market and the quality challenges that exist here in the city are most impacting your low-income households. Next slide. So what we'll do next is talk through our approaches. So you can go to the next slide. We looked at opportunities for multifamily rental development, and we looked at opportunities for single-family homeownership, affordable opportunities. And with this, one of the things that we're going to talk about when we look at those specific sites are the development costs that are associated to these opportunities and the financial gaps that exist on those opportunities. And so first, I want to spend a little time up front talking about why those financial gaps exist and how we think about going about filling those financial gaps in order to realize these affordable housing opportunities. So you can go to the next slide. On the right-hand side here, there's a typical market rate housing development. This is a hypothetical example. And when developers are considering market rate opportunities, they're first going to attempt to understand the kind of debt that they can achieve on that property. And that debt, that loan size, is based on the amount of operating income that you can gain off of that property. So in this hypothetical example, $1,800 per unit. On the right-hand side, or sorry, on the left-hand side, is an affordable housing scenario. So developers are similarly looking to understand how to fill and meet the development costs that are associated to that. However, they're working with a capped income, a restriction on the amount of income that can be achieved off of that property based on restricted rents for those households. And that's intentional, right, to ensure that these households are paying for rent that is appropriate for their income level to prevent housing burden and cost burden associated to those housing costs. So as a result, the operating income is limited, therefore limiting that loan size that they can achieve. And if you click next, you'll see in both cases there's a gap to fill. And if you go to the next slide, in a traditional market housing situation, that developer is going to look for equity. Right? They're going to find investors who are seeking returns on that residential product, and those returns are also going to be based on that income and the cash flow after the debt is serviced. In the affordable housing example, similar to the debt that can be achieved, that equity is also limited because the returns that are expected on that property are based on those cash flows. So if you click next, you'll see there's a persistent financial gap that exists. One of the ways that our team, especially when we're thinking about multifamily rental development, the way that we think about filling that gap are through some of the most reliable resources we have for affordable housing development, which is the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. So if you go to the next slide, there's two versions of that program, two potential awards. One is a 4% award, just shorthand for equity that can cover up to 40% of the development costs. And then the 9% award, which is a more competitive award because it's a higher equity amount that can be achieved up to 90% of those development costs. Now today, in the kind of current environment that we are all operating, all of the costs that we experience in development are rising. So we have rising construction costs, we have rising interest rates, we have rising insurance rates. So all of these layers essentially mean that even though there are additional equity sources for affordable housing development, there's that persistent gap that continues when we're thinking about developing these kinds of opportunities. And so oftentimes local governments are called to fill that gap. And if you go to the next slide, we'll see that that local gap filling has also increased in average. So because of all these rising costs, if we look at the most competitive award for 9% projects across North Carolina where you're receiving the most equity possible, the amount of public investment has grown to an average of $35,000 per unit in order to move forward on those development opportunities. I'll just pause here for a minute before we go to the next section to see if there's any questions or thoughts on that.
I have one. You show the trend line going down from 23 to 24. What do you base that on?
Well, there has been a recent dip in interest rates that has helped. This is also looking across a whole variety of different projects. So some of those project sizes are getting smaller, which means those total development costs are getting smaller. Okay. So there's a number of different factors depending upon where you are in the state and what kind of the development is that's kind of changing that median amount.
Less with less.
Yeah. All right, we can head to the next slide. So next we'll talk about this sites that we identified, and first we'll spend a little bit of time on the criteria of those sites. So first we looked within land within the municipal boundaries as well as the ETJ. We don't want affordable housing built in flood zones, so we took into account the flood zones that currently exist in Jacksonville. We looked at publicly owned sites as well as sites that have the potential for public site control. For the multifamily sites, we looked at larger sites, 2+ acres, that would support a multifamily rental development. And for the single family, looked at those smaller sites that could support a lower density or infill option. For the multifamily, I'll just note that our primary criteria there is also the eligibility areas for those tax credits that I described. And those areas in the city are primarily based on proximity to amenities. So the closer you are to the things that households need on a day-to-day basis, like groceries, schools, banks, hospitals, the higher competitive, the more competitive that piece of land is for that tax credit equity. So we can move on to the next slide. You'll see here a visual overview of what those amenity areas look like in Jacksonville. So the darker green, or sorry, darker yellow being that 9% area in Jacksonville, and then the lighter yellow representing the competitive area, or eligibility area rather, for those 4% LIHTC deals. And head on to the next slide. So here's an overview of the publicly owned sites that we identified as a part of this process. The first one here being land that you own on Commons Drive. This is the kind of additional portion, to a piece of land where you have a current affordable housing development proposed, Linfield Point. The next site is off of New Frontier Way, which is approximately, they're both close to 10 acres. You can go to the next slide. And then the publicly owned site with the potential for affordable home ownership is a collection of parcels that the city owns in downtown on Court Street, approximately an acre. So you can head to the next slide. We'll start first with our findings about those LIHTC opportunities, and we'll begin by looking at the 9%, that most competitive piece of land that you have. So you can move to the next slide. And that's the Commons Drive site. This site is surrounded by residential, commercial, recreational, and public use development. It is very close to grocery stores, medical clinic, public schools, and many additional commercial amenities. So for this reason, it is kind of a prime location that we believe would be eligible and competitive for that 9% award. In fact, the Linfield Point development that is on the other portion of that site just received that 9% award this year. So you can move forward. You can go to the next slide. So on the left-hand side here, I'll just note that this is a high-level conceptual design of what you could consider on this site. We have concentrated the affordable housing development on 2 to 3 acres of the total site. You can see here the proposed Linfield Development Point on the other portion of that site. You can click through to provide this site overview. Ideally, this site can afford you an opportunity to do additional affordable housing, to do a potential market rate program. You could think through a number of other community amenities or other city priorities that you might want to meet on this land, given the space that exists on this site. You can click through one more time. Here's the site scenario. We have a range of units. That lower range is an attempt to look at how to minimize the amount of public investment that would be required to move forward on this kind of opportunity. And then the higher range of units is the maximum amount of units that you could apply those LIHTC credits to. So that's the reason for that range. The total development costs on this site range from $13 to $21 million. And then the estimated financial gap that we see is approximately $1 to $5 million to bring about this project. I'll just note that that is above and beyond what we assumed is $0 in land acquisition for that future development partner. You can go to the next slide. This is the New Frontier Way site. It's surrounded by residential and commercial development. It's close to other affordable multifamily rental developments as well as a market rate townhome community, so a mix of rentals and renters and homeowners. This site is likely 4% eligible because it's slightly too far, particularly from a public, community, or senior center. So for the 9% award, you need to be at least 1.5 miles, kind of door-to-door driving from those amenities. And so this site is just too far from that.
Even if you have a mass transportation program?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Even if you have a mass transportation program?
Yes. Yes, that's true. Now, I will say that public transportation, aspects of public transportation do support additional points on the scoring that's used to determine these awards. So it certainly helps. But in order to get that kind of perfect score, you have to be within that distance. You can move to the next slide. So again, high-level concept of what could be accomplished on this site. You can move forward to the charts that are available on that slide. This is approximately 9.5 acres. As you can see here, a bigger development concept. And that is really because 4% projects are typically bigger. Unlike the 9% projects, 4% projects do not have a cap on the number of units that you can build with that deal. You can move to the next. So as you can see here, that range is 120 to 150 units, bringing the total development cost to approximately $31.5 to $39 million. The estimated financial gap at approximately $14.5 to $17.5 million, and that's because there's that lower level of equity that's achieved through that 4% project, so growing the gap in equity that would need to be covered to move forward on that opportunity. And finally, we'll look at the affordable home ownership site findings. So with the next slide, I'll just talk to you a little bit about the single-family development assumptions that we used, which are, number one, looking at opportunities for households earning 50% of the area median income. Depending upon your household size, from 1 to 4 persons, you can see here that range of income per year of who that represents here in your community. The development approach that we took was looking at a cottage court design. And what that means is you have smaller houses on smaller individual lots that are centered around a common green. And so you can afford kind of higher density than that typical traditional single-family lot, and have this common green that each homeowner pays into the care of that, kind of like an HOA, but instead they call them a POA. So that's the design approach that we took for looking at the sites on Court Street in downtown. The common space here could range from approximately 1/2 acre to 3/4 of an acre. We looked at 10 homes on this site, and we used the development budget that our colleagues at the Neighborhood Improvement Services are currently using to build houses today. Now, we know that you're not getting out there tomorrow with a shovel, so we did escalate those costs slightly to ensure that we're thinking through that forward-looking development cost that may exist for developing that space. You can go to the next slide. So here's this collection of parcels right on Court Street, surrounded by single-family homes and near Jacksonville's downtown commercial corridor. Some recreational amenities, particularly the park that you can take all the way down to the water. Just note here that this site is a little further, 2+ miles away from major amenity centers in Jacksonville. Here's an overview of what that cottage court design could look like. You'll see those small lots centered around a common green space with the parking concentrated in the back. The total development costs that we estimate are approximately $2 million for these 10 homes. The affordable mortgages that could be achieved by those future homeowners is just over $1.2 million. We included in this estimate the down payment assistance that our NIS colleagues are already providing to homeowners. So in total, in combination, that $250,000 in down payment assistance plus the $750,000 in additional development costs bring the total public investment to approximately $1 million. So you can press forward on that slide and we'll see that total cost there. One more click. There we go. All right. Additional questions before we get into next steps?
I have just a aesthetic question. It seems to me, if it would, I hate to go backward a slide, but what do you call it, courtyard or
cottage
courtyard
design?
The cottage court concept, because the houses, the houses are smaller and the lots are smaller, but because of the arrangement with the green space, it kind of almost gives a feel of like townhouse living or something, kind of that vibe.
Sure,
You don't have any photos, I'm sure, of actual installation of this, but I may research that on my own because I like to see what it looks like.
Yeah, look up some cottage court designs. We have some specific examples we can send you as well. But
I'd like to see what the finished product looks like.
That's what you all visited in Wilmington, right?
Mayor, when we went down, Tracy arranged for us to do a tour of a similar type of concept in Wilmington, and we have some pictures of that scenario. It's a little different than what we're proposing for how we build, but it's the same concept. Smaller lots, community space, smaller units, anywhere from 8 to 1,000 square feet. And so to show you those diagrams, if we can move towards some smaller lot sizes than this concept, I think this is manageable and has utility throughout the community, so we could find some of these smaller tracts of land and then implement 10, 12, and some aggressive 13 units, but having that shared concept, beautiful in the layout.
I got to get the name of the organization, but there was a group out of Kansas City that I was talking to you about earlier, but it was called, I thought it was Veterans Communities. I can't find it now. But I was wondering if there's some kind of synergy that can be created between what they do, because I know they were located in different areas.
that was the transitional housing, right?
Yeah, those are transition.
Okay.
But I'm trying to figure out if there's something else we could do, and maybe veterans housing. You know,
And we'll take a look at that. We'll
I'll try to find out more information.
Yeah.
Get it to you.
And part of our design, Mayor, is if we control the land, then we can bring in these other partners like what Mr. Jackson's talking about. Whether that partner is a Keith Walker or a James Mades or a Taft, we can bring those partners in. Or we can find these other groups like what we're talking to in Wilmington and have them come in. If we don't have the land, then we don't really have something that's that we've vetted, that we've looked at to try and see amenities, to find out how the transportation is going to work to and from. So I think it gives us opportunities to look at this as part of our plan.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, we'll spend just 2 more minutes on some next steps, recommendations that we have for the pre-development efforts. You know, as they're considered on either one or multiple of these sites, our kind of biggest recommendation is to conduct in-depth pre-development analyses to really understand those site-specific priorities, especially with some of those bigger sites where there's a number of different goals that can be met on those sites, and then to set up a preferred development program so that you're then soliciting a qualified development partner to meet those specifications that you've laid out. Kind of to Josh's point, leaving you in the driver's seat for what you want to see realized on those sites. So that's the primary next step that we consider in front of you, but we've been really excited and just really inspired to look across the city and understand the plethora of opportunities that we see in front of you for meeting the affordable housing need that does exist here in the city, and have been just really excited to be able to engage with you all on this topic. And of course, we'll be around for further questions or ideas that come up as you all think through these findings and think through the more targeted next steps that you want to take. So really appreciate the time.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah.
Mayor, at our retreat on Monday, we do have a shorter segment for council to talk about these next steps. So this presentation will lead us right into a segment that we have on Monday to dialogue. So looking forward to that opportunity with council to figure out the next steps. Mayor, we only have one item left. When we get to that point, just wanted to check and make sure that you want to move forward or if you're done.
Knock it out. I'm sorry, Sandy. Did I get it? Sandy. You all right?
Yeah, good.
While he's on a timer.
Not 3 hours.
While he's on a timer.
We'll let you know real soon when to quit.
You got an egg timer?
You've lost most of us already.
You missed the egg timer.
I think Dr. Washington said 3 slides. So name that tune. Roy's not even getting up, Mayor. I don't even know.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I know you've had a lot of business tonight, so I'll be brief, but I'll be happy to answer any questions so I can be here all night. So with that said, if we could go forward, obviously our clicker's not working tonight. But in your council agenda packet, you received a copy of the draft 2635 capital improvement plan. This draft is about 4 months earlier than you normally see it. This is in an effort to get started earlier on the budget process, get planning in place for our rate models and different pieces so that we can get through the budget process. So I know you see this annually, but the capital improvement plan is a 10-year window. We went to a 10-year window primarily because of the water and sewer system development fees. That legislation required a minimum 5, max of 10 year capital improvement plan. So we've moved all departments, so this document includes all of the projects proposed as part of that 10-year window. We update it annually, but at this point, what we've done is kind of got things into, executable projects, planned projects, and then reoccurring programs. And we try to get as many things as we can into that reoccurring programs, like the annual street paving project or the annual sidewalk project. And then we use this plan to evaluate water and sewer rates, the system development fees, and then ultimately it goes as part of your annual budget. So if we can jump forward, to be a capital improvement plan project, the project has to be longer than 12 months. It has to be construction, so it's not equipment or vehicles or sanitation trucks or computer equipment or anything like that. It is essentially a project that costs more than $50,000. It adds an asset with greater than 5-year useful life. And typically, if you're looking at each project, you can see what type of project it is. It's either new construction, replacement, rehabilitation, an improvement of an existing asset, or it's something related to growth. And most of the time you see that in water and sewer because we're planning for future growth. Next slide, please. So we try to, every year when we do this, relate the different projects to council goals. You can see that we've represented at least 7 of your 10 goals there. The current plan has 124 projects for a total of $150 million. The plan that we adopted last year had 122 projects, and it was about $152 million. So some projects fall off and some projects roll into the plan. So it's a living document that we look at every year. So if we could go forward. This just breaks down the different funding sources and tells you, as you can see and probably would expect, the bulk of the funding comes from the Water and Sewer Fund, and those are either growth-related projects or rehabilitation or replacement type projects of deteriorating infrastructure. The biggest change from this plan to the previous plan is the increase in funding for grants. The grant funding has gone up significantly because the city received $16 million in NOAA grants and another $2.3 million in, I don't remember the grant agency, but in stormwater funding. DEQ. Thank you, DEQ.
Mr. Hanson,
yes,
I have a quick question to ask you. Now, with the increase of electric cars that we now have, do you foresee the power bill percentage starting to go down?
It's a great question.
Don't give me the long version.
I don't think the state has even figured that out yet. It is a challenge that the Transportation Advisory Committee and the Board of Transportation are discussing at length. The short answer is what they've done to Powell Bill funds is established what the Powell Bill fund is in the state budget, and then they apportion it out based on road miles and per capita population.
You remember the 21st Century Transportation Fund or study that the state did a few years back because of the, electric vehicles and all, reduced gasoline usage, which would therefore drive your Powell Bill money down. They were looking at different
taxes,
different things. Yeah. And one of them, they looked at toll roads for one. Mm-hmm. Then they looked at vehicle miles traveled, which was probably the most productive one of the bunch. But then there's always the problem of people, gassing up in Virginia or South Carolina where the fuel tax is lower and bypassing North Carolina's fuel stations altogether. So they really never did come up with a good, solid
if I might comment on that, at the ECC, the COG, this came up recently, and one of the things that has been done in that discussion, they've not done enough and they've not done much, but what they have done is they've implemented now, they're not adding sales tax, but they are redirecting some sales tax from the general sales tax fund to transportation to help start the process of closing the gap somewhat. As you mentioned, fuel efficiency and EV vehicles, they're depleting gas tax revenues, while road expenses and maintenance expenses have escalated, doubled in some cases, tripled. No project costs what it used to. But anyway, what they're doing is, if you go, you buy a ceiling fan for your home at Lowe's, you pay in this county 7% sales tax. But if you go buy an air filter or a fuel pump for your vehicle at AutoZone, you will pay the same sales tax, but 2% of it will now be redirected into the transportation fund, and they're going to bump that from 2 to 4 and then from 4 to 6. So you don't have additional sales tax. They're just taking a section of it out for automotive purchases and redirecting it to roads. It's a Band-Aid stopgap for now.
What they're doing, we're getting the sales tax now, so they're really reducing the amount of money that we have discretionary, and
they're relabeling it
and putting it under the Powell Bill and sending out that way, which puts more restrictions on us. They really have not increased the funding for roads. They're just calling it a road by any other name. So
taking it away from you and giving it back to us.
Government's good at that.
Yeah, it's not even a good stopgap. It's just
it's a lie. Speak at all, did you?
I did. It is a problem that hasn't been solved though. Yes, ma'am.
Decades.
Well, we've been talking. Excuse me. They're not done talking about it yet. They've been talking about it for quite a while and continue to talk. And the problem gets worse. Hadn't gotten to the crisis point yet. No action until we get to a crisis.
That's right. Next slide, please. So here's the breakout of projects. As I mentioned, there's a total of 124 projects. 39 are in fiscal year 26. What I'll say about those 39 is that those are not all new projects. Many of those are rollover projects where they already have funding. We're either working on the design or the construction or the planning for that project, or they're an ongoing program like the street and sidewalk program that I mentioned earlier, where we plan those every year, so you would expect that that project would roll into the funding year. And I think just straight brand new projects, new to the CIP, new to FY26, there's maybe 4 or 5. Next slide, please. This is just a breakdown of those, and you can see that the bulk of those projects do fall in public services. That's because we're kind of the catch-all for anything that does not fit directly into a department. And on top of that, we have all of the infrastructure. Next slide. So in summary, again, only the first fiscal year of the capital improvement plan is funded. So we're talking FY26 for the upcoming plan. The other years are those planning projects. I'll remind you, this is a draft. There will be several changes. We'll talk about it in a minute, but we haven't run the water and sewer rate model. So that always drives a few changes one way or another. Some of these projects are growth related, so we'll have further conversations with developers to determine whether we need to shift some projects out or move them up, and so that not really add new projects, but adjust those years within the CIP. And then again, the idea behind this is that we're trying to support your goals and initiatives. So this identifies those projects that we are planning to complete over the next 10 years. And again, those water and sewer projects, whether they're growth or rehabilitation or replacement projects, will be covered in the rate model and become part of the rate model. And then those projects that are strictly growth related will be calculated as part of the system development fees. Next slide, please. And then this is my last slide. So the next steps are, you have a council retreat coming up, so where we will talk projects. That's where we will ask you to be thinking about the projects that are shown and those projects that you might like to see or you think may not fit with your initiatives or may need to adjust based on current initiatives. We will finalize the new water and sewer rate model. Finance, primarily Sabrina, has been working with a consultant to develop a new water and sewer rate model. We have seen a preview of that, but it's not finalized yet. And I think the plan is to bring that to you at a workshop in January. So, and when we bring that, we will have the draft CIP loaded into that model. And then from then until your budget is approved, the capital improvement plan will remain a draft. So if there's things that based on budget or revenue that we need to adjust, we will make those and bring those back to you. So that, the draft is in your council agenda item. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions?
Not yet.
Thank you, Wally. Give you a chance to read over it. All right, with that, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Thank you.